Hello, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome for the first time. I've been doing a lot of palette videos recently, so we're gonna do another one. I was watching another YouTuber. Her first name is Rachel. I will link her video down below. She did the video, and this isn't a new concept. If you could only keep one palette from every brand. So I'm gonna do that one today. And then I might do a part 2 where if I had to declutter a palette from each brand. So let me know if you're interested in that one, because I may follow this up with that. But yeah, if that sounds interesting and you want to see what I picked, I have a lot, then just keep on watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and let's jump into the video. Okay, like I said in the intro, I will link Rachel's video down below, but this is not a new video. YouTubers have been doing this for a while. I have a lot. I don't think Rachel had quite this many. I have way too many palettes. So the criteria was I had to have at least 2 in order to do this, because obviously if I only have one palette, I'm not picking anything. So I had to have at least 2. And going through the brands, there was way more than I thought. I'm going to try not to swatch a whole lot because we'll be here forever. So okay, I'm going to do the little ones first. So the very first one, I have a bunch of these from e.l.f. I think I have 4 or 5 now. I decided to keep the cream and sugar. I haven't actually used this one yet, which might sound dumb. I have a pinky one and the pumpkin spice one. I keep these for travel. So this one on its own, out of the ones that I have, seemed like a good travel option. It's got a couple of mattes, some shimmers. The formula on all the ones that I have is about the same level. It's a companion palette. I'm not going to say much more. Huda. I really like my Mercury Retrograde, but out of all of my palettes, this is probably my most used from that brand. I have 2 large ones, a bunch of the small Obsession ones, so I went with the Smoky Obsessions. You can see how dirty mine is. This is one that they've discontinued and brought back, and I don't know if they discontinued it again. I will say, if you have it, just be careful. I have seen a lot of people where this shade down here exploded. I've traveled with mine, which is why mine is quite dirty, and I've used this a lot. I've never had that happen, but just be aware that I have seen people's where it's either this shade or this shade just completely exploded. So be careful with these, but I do travel with mine. That one's probably, like I said, my most used. So I ended up going with that one. Laura Lee, I have 2 palettes from her still, and I ended up going with Sleigh Bell. This is a holiday palette. I don't know if this palette still exists. You can kind of see some of the pigment from the pink is kind of seeped on the edge, but it's still a really, really good palette. I usually use this with my Give Me Glow Christmas Morning palette. So, which I forgot to pull one of the Give Me Glows. So I'm going to grab that now. But I usually use that in conjunction with this, just because it's got similar shades and these aren't quite as pigmented as Give Me Glow, so they make nice blending. But I've also used this on its own. So if this palette is still available and you're curious about her formula, I do recommend this palette still. And then we'll do the Give Me Glow since I grabbed it. I went with the Christmas Morning. The other one I have is the Haunted Pumpkin Patch, which is fairly new. I'm always excited to use this around Christmas time. Now, of course, you can use it other times because you've got, greens. I like how it's, they've organized it to where you could do, the matte and the shimmer. I have used some of these colors together, and then, like I said, I usually will either pull this one in or the Rudolph one from ColourPop just for blending shades. But I really like this on its own, and this green duochrome up here is one of my favorites. This has become a permanent palette. It wasn't when I bought this, but you can still pick that up. I've got a lot going on over here, so I'm going to try and make piles that don't come crashing to the ground. I have a couple from Makeup Geek. Now, the brand doesn't exist anymore, and these are from before she had reformulated and came out with the single shadows and the magnetic pans. She had the matte and the shimmery one. This was before that, but I have the Champagne and Rose and the peach version. The formula is really, really good. So it's the traditional Makeup Geek formula. I do have some of her singles still, but I like this one just because I use pinks more than the peachy ones, so I went with that one. You can still get these on Poshmark, which is where I purchased both of mine if you're interested in those. Sugar Pill. This is one that I've almost decluttered. I have the pink capsule too, and it's just because the packaging is super annoying. I also have the Fun Size, the original one. I went with the orange capsule palette just because I like this color story. It's a little bit different. The formula on this isn't anything revolutionary, and the shimmers are just, I think, okay by today's standards, but I do still really like this one. So out of the ones that I have, I went with the orange capsule. Okay. Urban Decay was hard because I have a fair amount of Urban Decay. I have 4 Naked palettes, a couple all shimmer palettes. I ended up deciding to go with the Game of Thrones palette. My husband got me into Game of Thrones when we first started dating. I think season 4 was about to start, 4 or 5. So it's very cumbersome, but you do have the Iron Throne in here. Super bulky, and I liked this palette. Some people did not. You've got some duochromes. You've got some mattes. I talked about this palette in palettes that, you know, got me because of the packaging, because I did buy it because it was Game of Thrones. I did get this on sale. I didn't buy it on initial launch, which was nice. You only have like 3 mattes, which I think is why a lot of people didn't get on with this. Well, all shimmer looks are more prevalent, and I was doing, you know, more all shimmer looks with this when I, you know, first got it. So with nostalgia and the color story, I ended up going with the Game of Thrones palette, which kind of surprised me a little bit. We'll do the stack that's in front of me so I can move it, and then I got a stack that's got to come over here. I've got too many eyeshadow palettes. We'll just say that again. From Lunar Beauty, I went with the Moon Spell palette. This is actually, I have 3 palettes from Lunar Beauty. Yeah, I have the Nude Prism that I got in a boxy charm, and then I have the Strawberry Dream. I've never actually used them. I have them. This one I've actually used, and I do like that you've got purples and you've got, you know, the grungy greens that I like. So I decided to go with this partially because of the packaging. It's really cool. I never bought the new one just because it's very purple heavy, and I don't wear a ton of purple, but I do still like this one. A lot of these, not a lot, about half of these palettes probably are not available anymore, so I will apologize about that, but it is what it is. For Kaleidos, again, I have both of their larger palettes and all but one of their 6 pans. So I ended up going with Angelica Nyquist's collab, the Club Nebula. Really, really pretty grungy color story. This palette, I don't think got talked about quite as much as her collab with Odin's Eye, but I really like this palette, and I like that it goes very dark, and then you've got some blending shades and the shimmers in here. You got some duochromes. Very, very pretty. So I went with Club Nebula. Okay, Dominique Cosmetics. I ended up picking Celestial Storm. Again, I have 3 of her palettes. I really, really like this. I had the mini version, which I think looked like this. It came in a boxy charm. I think it was missing the grays, and it had like these 2 shades. But it was, like I said, it was about that big. And I really, really liked it enough that I gave that one away and tracked down the full size. So just color story, it's pretty. The formula on this one is nice. I was able to get it on Poshmark on a deal. I don't know if this one's still available on her website. At the time that I bought it, it was. I just didn't want to pay full price for it, so I was able to get it a little bit cheaper going through Poshmark. KVD, the 2 palettes that I have are from when Kat Von D was still owned, still associated with the brand. I ended up going with the Lolita. The other one I have is the Saint and Sinner palette, and I just have never used that one a lot. I've used this one. I like, it's an all matte palette. My mirror came completely broken, so I actually have tape over it. I didn't want to dig it out and mess up the packaging, so I literally just put packing tape to keep it from splintering. The package actually got run over in my driveway. That's a fun story. If you've been around on my channel, you've heard it, but anyways, the shadows were intact, and I've used this a lot. I just bring in an extra shimmer either from another palette or from a single. I just really like the formula of this one. I don't think people talked about this enough, so went with the Lolita palette. Melt Cosmetics was hard because I do own both of the Beetlejuice palettes. My husband bought me the whole set. I have the one that I picked. I don't know what the other one is. It's the one with like the pot leaves, Smoke Obsession. But I ended up going with Gemini just because I like the grungy color story. I've used this one probably the most out of all of the ones that I have. I don't use this side a whole lot, which I'm surprised because I really like this mustard shade, but I use these greens a lot. And because I didn't keep my little 6-pan from Kaleidos, the green one is probably one of my favorites. This is a good alternative to that, and that's a good alternative to this. So I ended up going with Gemini. Too Faced was another hard one. I have a lot from Too Faced. I ended up going with the original Gingerbread Spice. This is still one of my favorite palettes from them. My husband got this for me for Christmas when it came out. I use this a lot. I don't use the neutral side a whole lot. I tend to stick to the pinks and plums on this side, but I've never had a bad look come out of this palette, and this, like I said, is still my favorite. Mine honestly kind of has a Play-Doh smell. It doesn't really have a strong gingerbread smell anymore, but it doesn't smell bad, and I'm gonna keep using it, so I ended up going with that one. For Odin's Eye, this again was hard. I have some new ones that have come in, but I was torn between this one and the Christmas Morning palette, and I ended up going with Angelica's other collab, which is the Hella palette. I just really like that this has greens and pinks. My husband's favorite color is green, so I tend to wear a lot of green shadow for that reason. And then my favorite color is pink, so I like pink, and this is the best of both worlds. I really like, you've got a multi-chrome in here, you've got some duochromes. I really like this soot shade because you can use it with the greens, but it is technically a deepened plum, so when you use it with the pinks, it pulls more pink. So it's a really interesting shade, and I just really like this palette. It's a funny story. I had this palette for almost a year before I used it, and now that I've finally used it, it's one of my favorite palettes. So really, really like that. That again was a hard decision. BH Cosmetics, I have 3 palettes from BH. I don't know. I used to have, I don't remember. I don't think I got rid of it. Maybe I did. What is this? I used to have the, it was the big one, and it was like in a circle. I'll have to look down there and see if I have it still. I don't know. But I have this one and the avocado toast. So I ended up going with Blueberry Muffin. I'm wondering what happened to that palette. I either decluttered it or it's down there and I'm not seeing it. I've used this one the most. That was the one I'm talking about was the Zodiac palette. I was thinking about that one, but now I don't know if I even still own it. But anyways, I ended up picking Blueberry Muffin. I like the shades, and you do have some duochromes in here. It's a really, really pretty color story. Good formula. So I went with Blueberry Muffin. You know, you have too many eyeshadow palettes when you lose things. Beauty Bakery, I have 2. This is the Breakfast in Bed. It's a mauve-y, cool tone color story, but the formula on this is really, really nice. The shimmers are fine. They're nothing, you know, to write home about, but it's a really nice formula, really, really easy to use. So I ended up going with the Breakfast in Bed palette. Tarte, again, I have quite a few palettes. I ended up going with the original Tarte Pro palette just because of how easy it is. It's got a good variety. The shimmers are nice. You've got a black. You've got a pretty light cream shade. So easy formula to work with again. So I went with the original Tarte Pro. Pinky Rose, I have a few. I went with the 80s baby, primarily for packaging. The 80s is my favorite decade. You've got some purples because I was looking at the exotic peacock. You have some purples in this one, but I like, you know, there's a blue and some reds and yellows. So I kept this one primarily for packaging. So there's that. Let's see. Jeffree Star, the Alien palette is still my favorite palette of his, but I think I think I've done this video before. I always end up keeping the Jawbreaker palette. This is my most used rainbow palette. So for me, it's kind of essential. Whenever I'm recreating other YouTubers' looks, I usually use this one because it has every color that I could need. So I kept the rainbow palette. And then Natasha Denona, my husband bought me this one. I have a few palettes. I have some minis, but again, my husband bought me this one. Mine looks a little bit different. I popped all the pans out and reorganized it by color, so the color groupings are together. So I think it makes a little bit more sense. The way she had it laid out before, I think they were like together diagonally. This color story confused people when this palette launched, so... And I myself had a hard time coming up with looks, but I've used it a lot more since I reorganized it, which probably sounds dumb, but when things are together more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, sometimes it helps. So again, because my husband bought it and I do like the formula on this, I ended up going with the Circa Loca palette. Okay, we have one more stack. I told you I have way too many eyeshadow palettes. So from Wander Beauty, I went with the Wanderous Escape. It's just a neutral. You've got some pinks, a pretty pop of blue. The other palette I have leans a little more lavender. I like the pink and the blue in this one a little bit more, so I went with that. Profusion, I picked the Mauves palette. I've traveled with this one. Again, it's a really easy color story. These palettes will run you at like the $5 mark, which is nice. Their shimmer formula is actually really, really good. They're pretty metallic. So if you've never tried Profusion, some of them are hit and miss, but this is a good one. So there's the mauves. Let's see. We have Ace Beauté. I went with the Classical Paradise. I wanted this one forever. I think this is their original formula. They've since reformulated. I was able to get this on BoxyCharm on sale because they were getting rid of their old formula. From what I understand, I think their original formula was fine. Some people had issues with it. I tend to not have issues that everybody else has, so I picked it up on sale. It's a grungy fall palette. I really, really like it, so I went with that. Dose of Colors, I only have 2, but out of the 2 they're both collab palettes. I went with the Friendcation palette. I still have mine. I had to repress this blue shade because my dog got a hold of it, which is why my palette's a little bit chewed up, and this pan like completely popped out. I scraped it all up, popped it in there, repressed it, and it still works, but mine looks a little grubby. Still works, still performs. I've still used it. So we have the Friendcation. Makeup Revolution, I have a bunch. I have all of like Soph's collabs. I have a couple other palettes. My husband bought me this one. It's a green palette, so I ended up deciding to keep this one. Their formula in this tin packaging is pretty good if you not tried Makeup Revolution. I know their palettes can be hit and miss. Oh, and I have another one that I forgot to grab now that I'm thinking about it. Okay. We'll do ABH. I have 2. The other one I grabbed, I will do second. I do have the Zodiac palette. I found it. It was bothering me. From the original ABH palettes, I have a bunch still. I went with the Jackie Aina palette. This is probably my most used one. I use it more towards the fall just because of the tones that are in here, but I ended up going with that one. And then I did pull a Norvina one, even though technically they're both ABH. I have 3 of these big ones. I have 1. This is 3 and 4, which is the pink one. But again, my husband bought me this one. And it's a really pretty color story. It's got a lot of neon shades, bright shades. The shimmers in here are nice. There's no pressed glitters in this one. The pink one that I have does have a pressed glitter, but I just, again, my husband bought it for me. I really like it, so we'll keep that one. You see a theme here. A lot of stuff that my husband buys, I cherish it a little bit more, which was hard with Meld because my husband, again, bought me the Beetlejuice palettes, but I digress. Sigma, I have two. I went with the Enchanted palette. I wanted this one forever. I bought this during Black Friday this year, and I do have a pro account because I am a cosmetologist, and then it was on sale on top of that, so I ended up getting this at like 60% off. So it was a really good deal. I've wanted it for years. It's been around for a long time. You've got a couple of dual chromes in here, really pretty shimmers. Court of Roses, the other one that I own, but I ended up deciding to pick that one. Juvia's Place, this one has been like I said, I'm pretty sure I did this video a long time ago. I have the Tribe. I wish they would bring this palette back. This one's been discontinued. It's grungy. I'm gonna swatch this. I'm not gonna pronounce it because I will butcher it. It looks like a basic cream shade, but it has a shift to it, and it looks really, really pretty on the eye, and it looks really pretty with the green. So if you can find this, I do still see people selling this on like Poshmark, so if you can get a hold of it, recommend. Still my favorite Juvia's Place palette. Okay, we got Black Moon Cosmetics Urban Myth. I like this one just because it has mattes and shimmer. They don't have my absolute favorite matte formula. The other palette I have is all matte. I think the mattes in that one are a little better than this one, but I chose this one just because I like the shimmers and I can make this work. So, and the packaging. The mirror inside is a UFO. So this wasn't, I'm keeping this for packaging purposes too. Nabla, I have two. My favorite is the Side by Side. I've traveled with this one. It's one of my most used palettes, period, just because it's a really versatile neutral palette. I always get pretty looks. Again, you have a black and it goes super light, pretty, easy to work with. Never gotten a bad look out of it. We'll do ColourPop last. I have two from Be Bella. I ended up deciding to pick the pastel one. The other one is a Valentine themed one, so it's very red heavy. Looking at what I kept, I decided this, you know, in that universe where these are most of the palettes that I have, this one would be nice to add. You got pretty pastels, so I ended up keeping that one. Beauty Bay was another hard one. I went back and forth between this and the Mitchell palette, and I ended up picking the Dark Magic. Again, this one was discontinued. They do have a palette out currently that's very close to this, so I think that is why this never came back. But I really like this, and you've got purples, you've got blues and teals, and you can go very neutral with it. And then I like this duochrome shade in Crystal. It's one of my favorite colors in the palette, so I ended up picking this one just because I've used it more than the Mitchell palette. Morphe. I still have several Morphe palettes. I'm sure this is the one that I picked when I did this one before. This is the 35M. My friend Lauren bought this for me when I took my practical exam, so that's how old this is. But I love it. It was so sweet of her to buy it for me. I'd wanted it for a long time, and she didn't know that I had wanted it. She just happened to get it for me, and I like how grungy it goes with the greens. So still like this. This one was a good formula. Morphe's palettes are very hit and miss. That was a good one. Lime Crime. I went with the Greatest Hits. This is the large one. They did do a Greatest Hits small version. I just like the variety that's in here. I have a bunch of the Lime Crime small ones that I almost decluttered, and then I have two of the palettes that look like Polly Pockets, but I like the formula, and I like the mattes. The mattes that they chose go very grungy, and then you do have some pinks in here too, so you can do a lot with this palette, and I have traveled with this one too, so it's a good formula. The shimmer formula in this one is much nicer than the shimmers that are in the pink palette, the Venus XL. The shimmers in that one, I wouldn't even call them shimmers. They're very satin. This one actually has more metallic shades, so much better than that. We're to the end here. This is a very long video. I apologize. Okay, so the very last was ColourPop, and I ended up going with the original Hocus Pocus. This was hard because I was looking at the Mandalorian, the Child palette, because I really like that color story. The Taupe palette. There's the Rudolph. I have the big Star Wars palette. I just really like, for one, the packaging. The launch of this, I bought this when it originally launched. I was able to get a hold of it. That was a whole thing. And I don't know, not everybody loved this palette, but I like the color story. I like that it's grungy. You've got some greens, and then, you know, all the sisters are represented by the 3 rows in the middle, and then you've got some taupe shades. I don't know, I just really liked this palette. So, and then the artwork on the inside is very, very cute. So that's the one that I ended up picking. Like I said, ColourPop was hard. I've got a lot of good ColourPop palettes, but yeah, those are the palettes that I picked. Were you surprised by any of the ones that I picked? I was surprised by a couple of the ones that I picked because I wasn't sure going in. So yeah, let me know what you thought of my list. Leave me comments down below, and let me know if you want me to do the opposite video where I pick a palette that if I had to declutter one from every brand. That's probably going to be a harder video for me to pick. But yeah, let me know if you want to see that. And again, let me know what you thought of the ones that I picked. I hope you guys are doing well. Please have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you in another video very, very soon. Bye, everybody.